Boston 2012, the tech scene is buzzing and it feels like every entrepreneur knows each other. And there's this one guy running TUGG, Technology Underwriting Greater Good. He's writing the first checks in the most experimental nonprofits in Boston. Resilient coders, inner city weightlifting, organizations nobody else was interested in. He's not betting on spreadsheets. He's betting on the builders themselves, the founders. Today, that same friend runs Impellent Ventures, a venture fund with over 50 investments, portfolio companies across healthcare, AI, fintech, and consumer tech, and a partnership with Black Thought from the roots. The thesis hasn't changed. Bet on the founder, lean in, do the work. His name is David Brown. I've known him since those early days in Boston. I'm very excited to have him on the show today. Let's get into it. I'm Justin Obi. This is Return on Reputation. David, big welcome to Return on Reputation. Thank you for joining me. It's awesome to see you. It's been a minute.
It's awesome to be here.
So I was thinking about this in prepping for the call. The last time, I think when you and I really met and talked a lot, you were running TUGG.
Yeah. And
but-
you were with Boston Sports. I mean, it's a lifetime ago. Feels like yesterday and forever.
I know. It's crazy to think at that time it was a great time in Boston. Everyone knew each other, we're all working on and startup. So the startup community was vibrant, in my opinion, at that point. And then at some point we all grew up and got busy and had families. And so it's great to catch up again.
Yeah, no, I always say I look back at that. That's like a special era in my life, and I think it was for a lot of other people. I miss and love that we have those days behind us.
I know. It's awesome. And I think there's I don't know if it's coming back. I see more and more events, especially in the tech scene, coming back in Boston. I don't know if it's like that in Rochester or everywhere you're traveling. I know you're on the road a lot right now.
Yep. Yeah, no, we joke. I live in Rochester plus the back of an airplane. So it's really cool things. But yeah, I agree. No, I think you're getting pockets for sure, right? Like Boston, he's had a recovery in the last few years, and a lot of markets post-COVID are starting to come back alive, and it's great to see it.
Yeah. No, it's awesome. Especially the in-person stuff. I think that's where the magic is. So It was a tough go during COVID, but I think we're back.
Let's hope so.
And I think that, so during the TUGG years, we did a lot of, there are a lot of in-person events. I think you had 14,000 or something people through your events now. Tell us about, Technology Underwriting Greater Good, if you don't know TUGG. Tell us just a little bit about that experience and then how you went from TUGG to Zap RX to Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce and then to now Impellent. And you started that in 2018.
You got it. Right. So great arc on the whole thing. And I appreciate you tripping me back down memory lane. I love it. So, as you said, TUGG was Technology Underwriting Greater Good. So the premise came from Jeff Agnon, who was the founder over at Accomplice, and Hemant Taneja, who is now the CEO at General Catalyst Partners. And their concept when they got going was really, really simple, right? Boston needed more opportunities to get together, and it would be a lot more fun to do that around giving and being able to figure out how do you use the capacity of the ecosystem to support companies and accelerate them. And the premise I was coming right out of business school. I got to Boston through Babson originally. And so coming out of business school, I was very focused on social enterprise, and I was really intrigued at that point of how venture capital and venture capital principles could be used to accelerate this field of venture philanthropy and accelerate nonprofits. Because if you think about what venture does for startups, it's taking that first few years and taking the money away from just having to be friends and family for everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Really, hey, how do we institutionalize growth? And nonprofits and they still, for many reasons, haven't really broken through that. And so that first 5-year cycle, people live on friends and family capital. And we said, let's change that a little bit. Let's see if we can use venture strength, rigidity, plus that ecosystem to accelerate. And so, as you said, we were hosting up to 14,000 people a year through unbelievable events, allocating a few $1 million to these unbelievable founders and organizations. And for me, what got so interesting there is twofold, right? One, it taught me the value of a community, how much and creating ecosystem pays dividends over the long term. And then secondly, that
it's massive.
For me personally, right, as someone who I guess grew up as like a liberal arts human being, right? Having the dynamic interaction of dealing with and interacting with different stories and different conversations was really compelling. And
Mhm,
more
mhm.
importantly, I could start to see really cool patterns that evolved from company to company, story to story. And so it allowed me to be able to start to say, hey, here's a bridge, here's an insight, here's a way to accelerate your business, which was really cool.
That's interesting. And you're right. There's once you start to hear story after story after story, you on paper, I think if you step back, you're like every business is so unique.
Mhm.
But then at the same time, they are all the same, right? They all in that, stick with me for a second. They all have similar problems, at different stages of the life cycle. As they mature, they're going to face similar problems along the way. So did you see that in Tug? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so I think that's partially right, and I would almost,
Okay.
flip the script and say every
Yeah.
idea has already existed, right? And
Okay. Okay.
fundamentally, it's about execution, and so you see repeat problems around execution and the dynamicism that takes. But every company, those problems are so nuanced, right? And so for me, you
Mhm.
go from, "Oh, geez, let me see if I can help you solve every single one of these," to realizing, okay, I'm never going to be able to solve every one of your problems, no matter how much work I have, because you guys have a
Mhm.
bunch of other things. But what I can get really good at is getting to know who might be good problem solvers for you, and how do I continue to build bridges, connections, and relationships for you from there. And that gets back to that community.
Mhm.
I believe you can figure out who plays what role well, and you can help bridge great people together. Great things really
Yeah.
happen. And so if you look at Tony Hsieh, right, the founder of Zappos,
Yeah.
that was his entire premise about recapitalizing the downtown region of Las Vegas was
That's right.
intentional and unintentional connections between people are what created business and create the opportunity. It's not
Mhm.
just a great idea, it's what do you do with the people that are around that. And so that's what I found, and that's where I've gotten kind of the most energy around over the last little bit. And so Tug really brought that out of me as a human, and that's been awesome.
That's awesome. And
Yeah.
so you've carried that forward into Impellent.
Yeah,
And
that's
just
exactly right.
well, how did you, yeah, like fast forward to 2018 a little bit.
Yep.
You start Impellent. Why? Like,
Yeah. So before we get right to 2018, I gotta jump
yeah,
in.
please, sorry.
I loved my time in Boston. I never thought I was gonna leave there, and if you know
Okay.
anything about Rochester, awesome place to grow up, great setup, in terms of family, opportunity, cost of living, but I grew up in one of our toughest eras ever,
Mhm.
right? So I graduated high school in 2003, so I'm starting to age myself, but with Xerox, Kodak, Bausch& and Lomb, all 3 of those guys were in their implosion mode during that
Yeah.
period, and Buffalo and Syracuse's core, businesses were starting to have some similar issues. And upstate New York was just kind of falling apart. It wasn't dead, but it was in a hard period. And so when I left, I kind of said to myself, so glad I got to spend time in this for part of my life. I'll come back and visit mom and dad, but they'd already bought another house in a different part of the country. And I was like, I don't know how often that's going to be and what that's going to look like.
Okay.
So when I got to Boston, I finally felt like I had a place that I was going to call home for a long time. We'd anchored in. Life was really good. Friends were amazing. I mean, when you're hosting 14,000 people a year, every now and then one or two of them say you're a decent person and you build some pretty good peer networks. And so I thought I'd be there forever. And so, as you said, I went to ZapRx, helped, with that company for a bit. And then I jumped over to the Chamber of Commerce and
Yeah.
was really kind of anchoring into that. And right during the middle of the Chamber of Commerce time, my mom, and I grew up with a very strong family tie, got pretty sick. She developed a pretty
Oh,
tough
man.
muscular disorder that was, really unknown at that point. And we
Okay.
just had our second kid, right? So our boys are now 12 and 9, which is impossible for me to conceptualize. By that time, they were 3 months or 3 years old and 6 months old. And we said,
Yeah.
what's our number one priority? Let's have the kids next to grandma and grandpa. If we can do that, everything else falls in place and we'll create value
Yeah.
there. So we moved the family back to upstate New York in, late 2017. My thought was there's probably not going to be much going on. I'm going to start a company. And so I was actually working on a company for early childhood development. Got a
Okay.
little early to market, but it was really kind of cool concept. And I still think there's a market there. And as I started bouncing around to get to know the ecosystem here, same thing as I did in Boston, I started realizing there's some awesome people despite my
Mhm.
expectations.
Mhm.
there were great founders in Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, and then you started looking up and down, the East Coast, and you started looking throughout the Rust Belt, and I would go, guys, this is the same pattern we saw in Boston in 2010, right?
Okay. Interesting.
Unbelievable innovation, really great founders, unbelievable university, development. Everyone is talking about entrepreneurship. It's not just a Harvard, MIT, Stanford thing anymore.
Yeah.
But the bridge from these ecosystems back to Boston, New York, and San Francisco are still pretty weak. Most people are just getting sucked into accelerators, and that's not a bad solution, but you're losing our regional capacity to add value, and you lose some of the pricing arbitrage that you get by living in an ecosystem like this. And so our philosophy was, let's see if we can create a really meaningful venture fund that did a lot of those community building aspects that we had worked on in TUGG, but said, hey, our end goal is to make sure you get capital from Boston, New York, and San Francisco, but at the right time, at the right stage. And if we do that appropriately, that'll be super helpful for, our region and for our folks. And it'll take this philosophy that, capital is not evenly distributed, but skill set is evenly distributed to the mainstream. We can create something really cool out of that. And it actually, when you get back there, it really hits, because I'm looking at a lot of my friends from Boston. I'm like, oh, that kid's from Buffalo originally. This kid's from Rochester.
So
like,
many.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, you were just talking about your wife's from Buffalo, right?
She's from Buffalo. Yeah.
So it would, more talent.
One of my best friends, Court Johnson.
Of course.
Also, right? From Rochester.
Yep. Exactly right. So
he and I would walk around Boston. He would just say, "Go Bills, go Bills." All these people wearing Bills hats. I was like, wow, there's a lot of people from upstate.
I know. And he was a real, I don't think he ever jumped on the Patriots bandwagon.
No, he did not. No. He's a diehard Bills fan. For sure.
I know. So yeah. But yeah, no, so that's why
that's interesting.
So that's how we got things really kicked off.
So Impellent was a way to evenly distribute capital into the areas that you felt were being ignored.
Well, yeah. So it's the two things, right? It's the aspect for me. I knew that it was a personal thing that I loved, just being able to interact and see a bunch of things, building community. But I also saw it and said, hey, fundamentally, there's a real opportunity here to be able to accelerate some of these companies. And so we call other venture friends and say, hey, if I find something really good in Buffalo, I know you say you want to bite down to every one of your porticos, but would you take a flyer on this? And like, yeah, absolutely. What we normally don't get is real vetted access to those deals. So we launched that, really got going on 2019. And then the, first fund closed the beginning of 2020, hard work to get it going, but loved it. And once we got out into the market, COVID happened. It was literally a month later. And our philosophy that entrepreneurship could raise in the rest of the country shot through the roof, right? No one wanted to be in big cities anymore. Ecosystem falling apart, and online access meant a lot. And so all of a sudden this thesis was kind of dead center of where the future of venture could become. And still early days for it, but I really think it was apropos for the time. And I think it's where the future has to go to some degree.
I've got two questions for you just around the founding of that. The thesis, I think, is, because I want you to kind of walk through the tagline, is supercharging startups, if I'm right. How do you guys specifically do that? And then, as like maybe a follow-up, as you started this, to me, thinking about starting and raising a fund is intimidating. Like, how did you wrap your head around that? I know you were around that ecosystem for a while, but what made you say, this is my time?
Yeah. So let's go for your first question first, and then go back to the second one. So supercharging startups for us, right, fundamentally means providing access to the tools that you need and the ecosystem that you need to be successful as a founder. And so I think everyone on our team has the capacity to give great strategic advice about how do you run a business, where do you go? But even more, it's saying, hey, you're in a disenfranchised ecosystem, or you're somewhere that doesn't have as much cachet as San Francisco. How do you get connected in with the right, co-investors? How do you get right mentors, right? Like, part of the issue, we see this all the time, right? Is like San Francisco investors will be like, oh, cool, you're in New York City. That's a cute emerging market. They still don't know what, big looks like.
Really?
And you talk to friends in Boston, New York, and they go, oh, Rochester, that's an awesome ecosystem, but they don't know what big looks like. And the reason people don't know what big looks like is they haven't seen enough ventures get to scale. They don't have enough friends, right? One of the number one indicators of whether or not you go into entrepreneurship is how many CEOs did you know as a kid, right? How many founders did you know? And it makes sense because it
Yeah.
mystifies the capacity to potentially do that. And so for
Totally
us,
agree.
right on point was saying, cool, you're going to start a business. You want to think big. We've got to introduce you to founders who've grown,
Yeah.
$10 billion businesses. So you stop thinking, and that nothing wrong with a 20 to $100 million outcome. They have places for our fund and they have places for a lot of founders, right? And meaningful change in life. But how do you think about that billion to $10 billion outcome? That requires some of the right mentors. And so that's what we spend a lot of time
Okay.
supercharging founders around, is making sure you get access to tools, mentorship, and then growth capital that you need, whether you're staying upstate New York or areas like upstate New York, or you travel, right? And that's
Mhm.
the same thing that we saw at Boston needing on the early days.
Got it.
Now to your second question,
Yeah.
why? Because I had no clue, right? It's
That magic power of being naive.
yeah, well, that's what they always say, right? If
Yeah.
anyone ever knew how hard a startup was, they
Oh,
would
yeah.
start it, right? And so it's the same type
Or
of
my
thing.
third.
I had a good friend. I was coming back to Rochester, and he jokingly said to me, he's like, "Hey, Dave, you probably know enough people to give you a few $1 million. Why don't you just start a fund on the side, so that you can invest in some of your buddies as they get going?" I was like, yeah, maybe. That's not a horrible idea. And then as I kind of thought about it and saw the opportunity, I was like, yeah, no, that's a really good idea. Then you start opening up and you're like, okay, this is way more complicated than it looks like. And I had some really good encouragement from folks I got to know in the Rochester ecosystem when I first came back here. So
Yeah.
the origin story is not glamorous. It's just kind of like, oh, okay, I see an opportunity. It looks interesting. And sure, someone tells me I'm gonna be good at this, maybe I'll be good at this, right?
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
saw an extension of some of the stuff that we'd already done. Now, I will tell you, it's been a lot of fun because when I launched it originally, I had one other partner, a OG of the Rochester VC community,
Okay.
but he was kind of aging out of venture, and so we knew it was gonna be a shorter term thing, and so I ended up having to be the front for a lot of it. And so when we got to fund two, that was when I got to kind of look up and say, okay, I think this thesis is working. What
Mhm.
else can I do? Who else can I work with? And so that's when we brought in Phil, who you know well, and hopefully a few people in the Boston ecosystem,
Yeah.
rumor Phil Beauregard. And then we
Of course.
brought in Tree Trotter, who I think we'll talk about later, but he's the third part of our leg, and he's the lead singer of the Roots, the musical group that's on the Jimmy Fallon show, which always is a fun differentiator, I think, for what we do.
Yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah.
So cool.
As he says, he likes to bring the cool to a relatively unexciting human beings otherwise. So
I mean, the Roots, I mean, I grew up in high school listening to the Roots. They're just so good. And then when I found that out, I was like, wow, I guess
yep.
you guys are pretty cool. So
No, just him still. That's fine.
so wait, so as people, I mean, you guys are evaluating, I'm sure, thousands and thousands of deals. When a founder comes to you, what are the things that you're looking for? Like the top 5 things that
Yeah.
you are using to evaluate the person over the pitch.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, for us, it's team, team, and team, right?
Yeah.
So I would say, as we're doing our diligence, 90 to 95% falls into team, and I can talk about what that actually looks like.
Okay.
The reason why it specifically goes into this, if you look at any of the best companies from a venture return perspective, none of them stay where they start, right? Like
Mhm.
people
Mhm.
say there are riches and niches because you've got to start with something small and then grow from there. Every concept's always happened. And so if everything's always already been done, everything's already been programmed, then the question is, okay, how do you find scale? How do you replicate something? And that takes a certain type of founder, a certain type of perspective on the world, and a certain type of desire to win and to execute. And so as we're looking at getting companies off the ground and thinking about where we're going to invest, we're saying, all right, how much of a riot breaker do we think you are? What's the chance
Yeah.
that you are going to be the one who can take this not just from a $0 to $5 million company, but a 20 million, 100 million, and a $500 million company, and what are
Sure.
the steps that are required to make that happen? And so that's how we break it down. When we're thinking about the team specifically, number one is always going to be who's the CEO, what is their mantra. Few
Yeah.
things that we look for there. One is, what is your grit level going to look like? Startups suck. They're hard, and you are going to die 3 times before you even start your business. And so you need someone who has the capacity to be able to keep going even when things get tough. one of Phil's favorite questions, and you'll ask, and so if you ever pitch us, be prepared to answer this, is like, what's the hardest thing you've been through in your life? And it's
Mm,
not because we have a predisposed judgment of what outcome or what answer is correct, but it tells us how you think about it. How do you deal with adversity? How are you going to move through it? And where do you go from there? After you have resiliency within the founder, then it's what is your unique insight to your industry? How do you fit into this, right? Are you bringing a lens from outside of your world in?
mhm.
If that's the answer, what makes you special within this? If you've been in the space for a while, what is the distinct insight that you have now because of that? And what are your relationships going to do for you to be able to help leverage and create viability? It's really interesting that when I was at BAPS and we wrote a report looking at all the entrepreneurs that came out of the undergraduate and graduate program and start businesses.
Yep.
Number one factor for both revenue as well as capital raised was being 5 to 10 years past your terminal degree. Didn't matter what degree it was, didn't matter how
Interesting.
it was. And the reason why, we as we were digging into it, our supposition for why that exists is 5 to 10 years. You've got industry experience, you've got unique insights, but you're not yet jaded, right? You're still like, hey, there's something to
Right.
do here. And so we think a lot about kind of like how do people fit within their market. Founder market fit is a really key criteria for us from a
Yeah.
perspective. And then the third one, right, that really falls into that is great. You've got a unique insight, you've got a ton of resiliency, but are you a leader? Does anyone want to follow you?
Mm,
Because for you to execute, you can't just be smart. You have to also be able to form the team around you that allows you to accelerate. And money is only such a big trigger over the end, right? You have to be able to kind of create vision there. So we look for people with proven track records of being able to hire or bring in or attract really good people. And so that's either you already got people who you're working with, advisors,
sure.
mentors, other, employees, or you've done it before and you've been through the exercise. And so we look for particularly, first time founders, a track record that shows you've got the capacity to do that is really important because that's what you can easily see in a pattern recognition of repeat founders, but it's
Mhm.
really hard to pick up on the first time founder experiences. How are you going to be as a leader and as a hirer of people? So,
Yeah.
yep. So that
Yeah, I
that's
was gonna say that. I mean, if you already see the track record, like you're investing in a third time winner, right? Someone who's already done 1, 2, and 3 businesses, they've won on each of the. I would imagine it's much easier to make that decision.
maybe, maybe. I mean,
Ooh.
you would say so, right? But
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
I mean,
You're pushing back.
we see it
I
all.
want to know that.
I got a pitch the other day. Guys, hey, I'm a 15-time founder, or whatever, and you go, okay, but what have you done? Have you seen it through? Have you had
Mm,
these different things? And
got it.
so, having done it before matters a little bit for the outcome.
Okay.
Having done it before and failed can mean a lot if you learn the right lessons, right? And now you
Yeah. Yeah.
shortcut it. I think like everything though, right? And we talk about this and people are like, oh, colleges, are they useful? Are they not useful? Do you have
Mhm.
to have a Harvard degree to go start a great company? They're indicators of past success. They show that you have the ability to be resilient and to work hard in a certain context.
Yep.
Whether that directly applies to what's coming on in the future also depends on where is your mental health right now? How are you thinking about the future? What is your lens? And so, you know, most of the time you look at someone and say, hey, you're a great founder. Like maybe we'll just write you the check because we know you have the capacity to do it.
Okay.
But sometimes those founders are not going to succeed on one idea or another because of the timing of something. And so we try to be conscientious of where are you as a human being and
Mm.
how does your past story reflect where your future story is trying to go.
Yeah. I mean, I think you've publicly said the average. You've compared the VC relationship to a U.S. marriage.
That's a Jeff Agnew quote that I stole in
Oh,
that.
is it? Okay. Okay.
But I
Yeah.
I do love saying it, and it might be slightly inaccurate or accurate, but the point is, right, at the end of the day, the average American wedding lasts somewhere between 3 to 7 years, and the average VC relationship is 7 to 10 years, right? And so it is
Yeah.
when we get engaged with a company, I expect that I'm gonna have to be with this person for a long time. So that's criteria number 3 is, cool, good market, good enough market, great team. Do I actually wanna spend time with you, right? And I got this. I mean,
Mhm.
you get this just from dealing with enough people. They're great founders who are complete, jerks or assholes,
Yeah.
and you don't
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
to reiterate or spend time with them. But one of our LPs was telling us, he's like, look, Dave, every fund at a certain level is good enough, right? You have a minimum threshold of what's acceptable. And the difference for us as an LP between a 3x return and an 8x return isn't that material over the long term. And it can be tied to just random fluctuations. What it matters to me is who do I have to wake up and spend my time with every day. And so we look at it in the same way as, hey, if I'm going to have to be on a minimum of 4 board calls and probably 12 monthly calls every single year with you for the next 10 years. God, I don't want to spend, a few hundred hours with someone who's just going to drive me up a wall. Right. And
no one would.
Yeah. And when you have a bad VC, founder relationship, it hurts the business. It hurts the VC. Yeah. So we want to be able to be a creative. We want to be helpful. We want to be motivated to do stuff with them because it's a long haul relationship.
Got it. What about, okay, so our thesis is that personal brand matters. And I think that those who embrace personal brand publicly, they build their reputation publicly, have more leverage than others, those that don't. How much, when you're like evaluating a founder, how much of their digital footprint are you evaluating? Are you exploring their LinkedIn, their Instagram, thought leadership posts from the past? Does that have any weight at all? Or
it's definitely so the easy answer was in the past. We definitely made sure there was nothing atrocious, right? But it was like, hey, scanning for negative signal versus anything else. And now with AI, we're definitely scanning it a little bit more carefully to say, hey, what else is out there? What are they saying? Is there a thought leadership? I think thought leadership can be very valuable and it can be contrived. I think it's the value of who you're talking to versus how many people are talking around you, right? Again, how does that relationship fit within the greater context? And look, a lot of people who are personally brand focused aren't great founders because they don't necessarily pay attention to the business in the right way. I remember another investor friend of mine, and it's one of the most poignant things I ever saw, right? He was talking about his portfolio and he had a great way of writing it. He's okay, so here's the 100 investments. So you have a much broader portfolio. Here's the 100 investments. Here are the first 40 companies that are all zeros. And then he had his best performing ones at the very end. And he's but this is why you're going to have a 10X fund because, the zeros don't matter, but the big ones. But then he had a really funny note and he's, hey, by the way, this company just raised a Series C round of capital, C, not seed, Series C round of capital. Out in San Francisco, huge firm. We should be celebrating, but I just wanted to let you guys know that I'm writing this deal down to zero. And if you guys want why, it's because as soon as this guy, he runs a B2B business, got the round of capital, first thing I saw was posters of him on every single train station across, San Francisco, big smile saying, come do it. And he looks at me, this guy's no longer focused on his business, right? He's caring about his brand and his ego. And he goes, once that happens, the business is over, right? And so if you are doing and running a brand in service of yourself, that's bad. If you're running it in service of the company or in service of, the ecosystem and you're focused on real founder connectivity and value and sharing, that's really, really powerful. And so I would say, I agree 100%. Just make sure you're doing it on the right thing.
And that's the right way.
And we'll get into it. It's like interpersonal and interactive relationship to me, and the brand you carry there means twice as much. But what I care about, sure, whatever you say on Twitter matters as long as it's not a reputational risk. What I care about is I call people who, and ask them, what did you do in your last job, or how do you know this person? What are they doing? That then they give you a glowing recommendation. That's like the real personal brand that I care about at the end of the day.
Your character.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. Which is hard to, no, I mean, we live in such a polished world of social media. I that makes total sense that, someone says when you ask them, how is so-and-so in the tough situation, did they burn the bridge and go crazy, or, did they rally around the team and get everyone together and get through the tough time? Probably matters much more.
Yep. It's a nuanced conversation with many more threads, I have no doubt.
Yeah. How are you dealing with, I would imagine, we can't go 2 words without saying the word AI these days. I want to shift the conversation a little further. one, as you're getting pitches, so are they more, can you tell that people are using AI to now, send emails to you or reach out? Does it work? Where are your thought process on that? And then I want to get into, at some point, is how are you thinking about your portfolio companies and how they start to use AI to drive real value?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look, I mean, I think everything now it's there's more AI generated content than there's human generated content, period.
That's awful. Yeah.
Right now, it's only going to proliferate, and very little things are going to be um, real, quote unquote, anymore. But if the intention is real, the outcome can be good, right? So I don't care if the inbound email that I get is AI generated, but is it conveying the right information? Like at the end of the day, right? We're in an information exchange
Yeah.
business. And so I want to make sure that, hey, if you're going to use AI, make sure you're using AI the right way to convey the key things that are going to matter and get across to me. And the cold emails, the initial contact is only to say, hey, let's sit down and have a conversation. Let me show you that I've got something that's unique and differentiated, that I myself are unique and differentiated. So I'm pretty indifferent to the medium of how that's going to get to me.
Okay.
It's going to be weird, right? And it's true. We get an inbound AI message with a deck that's going to go into our AI grading tool. And we're going to look at it, the output from that, and say, hey, did our AI think your AI was smart enough to pass the amount of credibility? And that doesn't mean we won't take a second look as well. But
Sure.
that's part of the process now, is kind of saying, okay, does our AI give you enough credit? And do we find you to be uniquely differentiated enough to our kind of standards of what we're looking for that it's worth the conversation? So you can see it. I think AI is getting better at masking it. You can create it to have your own voice. If you're going to do it, take the time. Too many of these emails are so generic and so
Yeah.
rote that, like, even when I do it, I'm like, okay, you're not even going to go to my AI. One thing, and by the way, AI is really messing this up from the investor side. They're trying to get a lot of things so concise and direct that a lot of these inbounds now are like teasers without information, right? And they're like, hey, founder, Hawaii, raising $2 million. You want to have a conversation? I don't know what sector you're in. I don't know what you're building. I don't know what your history is. Like, you're not answering the key questions, right? Like the classic pitch, right? Like the 10-slide deck of here are the important things. Your email's got to cover the same thing. I need to know who you are, where you are, what you're doing, why you're doing it, and why you're uniquely differentiated. And if you can't convey that in 1 to 2 paragraphs, or a very concise email, AI or human written, you're missing the point, and you're not going to get it. So
yeah, I think there's a formula to cold outreach or warm outreach, whatever you want to call it, or whatever the situation is. I always feel like it's, hey, who am I, real quick?
yep.
Like, why does this matter now? And why, and then what is the CTA? What do you want from this?
Correct.
And how I'm going to bring you value by you saying yes or no.
Correct.
It's and it's amazing how many. I mean, I'm like, no one. I get 100 emails a week of cold pitches on different services that our agency could use potentially. None of them even meet half of those qualifications. So I can't imagine what you guys are going through.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's 5,000 plus stacks a year, and you go,
Yeah.
okay, cool.
Insane.
Yeah, make quick decisions. Yes, no, maybe. Right.
Yeah.
It's those type of pools, and the yes pile has to be a lot smaller than the no if we're going to be able to get through everything.
Yeah. Yeah. But and are you seeing in the companies that you're looking to invest in now? Because I think I read about Enfi. They just closed 15 million Series A at the beginning of the year. They are, right into the AI world. That's their entire thing. Are you looking at more and more AI companies to invest in, or
I think
is that the thesis now, or
yeah,
are you there?
no, we're not an AI fund per se,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
AI is a key part of everything, right? If you're not AI first, AI enabled in some capacity, right? Like, you're missing the boat, right? It would be like going back to 1998. It'd be like, the dot-com bust, and saying, hey, cool, you're running up into it and you don't have a web presence in some capacity. Like, you're not actually considering where your brand and your existence is. Like, you're probably doing it wrong. And it doesn't mean that there weren't awesome brick and mortar companies that came out during that period, right? There are going to be some really good picks and shovels and robotics companies and similar that are coming out right now. You better be using AI in some capacity to drive power and acceleration through your businesses, right? And we're at a stage now where you need to be able to get twice as far with half the resources that you did last year to be
because of AI.
attractive from a scale and operating perspective. And so we're looking for founders and operators, whether it's deep into AI or tangential to it, that are using that to be able to program their go-to-market strategy a lot more effectively, to be smarter with their allocation of cash, and to be able to prove their metrics a lot earlier. So, no, I mean, obviously, N5 is dead center of it. Famous Labs is dead center of it. These guys are creating within the core of the AI infrastructure. And we've got other companies, like we just did a company called Everfor, another Boston-based company that's, doing testing of animal furs to detect allergens, right? It's a good classic patent technology, and they're going to go through traditional transportation or distribution channels. I think fundamentally what's going to come down to whether or not it's an AI or a not AI native company, what's going to be underlying both of them is going to be interesting is continuing to be what is your go-to-market strategy? What is your relationship building? And going back to that conversation of trust, who trusts you? Why do they trust you? And how are they going to buy? Because what's going to make your business good is, can you acquire customers inexpensively? Will they give you great value over the lifetime of the business, right? And do you imbue trust that make people now want to churn? They want to stay with you, and you can get efficient sell through. And so the fundamentals of what make a good business are going to stay the same regardless. And so I think that's where we're kind of keeping our eye on right now.
Do you think companies have cracked I mean, there's a lot of data, or not, whether it's data or not, but there are a lot of headlines, I should say, around, AI has been deployed, but large companies aren't seeing the value yet. Are you seeing a different story from the small, because you're investing seed, series, maybe some series A?
Nope, pre-seed seed. We're getting in there.
Pre-seed and seed. Okay. Yeah. So are you seeing that is that a different story at those stages?
In terms of the adoption curve of I mean, look, if you think
Well, I guess like in the value creation of using AI because I imagine it's easier to deploy.
yeah, look, I
versus
mean,
a large scale enterprise.
we're still first inning, right? I mean, OpenAI is 3.5 years old, right?
Yeah.
Like we're
Yeah.
talking,
Early innings.
yeah, very, very early. And so the question looks at it and says, okay, so sure, the adoption might be there. The cost benefit might not be there because people haven't quite decided whether or not they're okay losing certain team members. They're not quite sure which old tools, right? So you're getting this weird ecosystem right now where people are taking on the tools, but they're not fully adopting them. They're only getting halfway of the use case of them, right?
Yeah, because they're testing so much.
Yeah, you're not firing all your legacy products. You're not firing all of your legacy employees yet. And so there's still this, hey, cool, like our expense line is going up. Our revenue is only going up incrementally, and we haven't quite figured out what to do with it. And so I think some people are still miscuing on it. They're misusing it. They're underutilizing it, right? And so what we're finding is the early adopters, right? The power adopters are doing a great job. And people are just learning what that really means, right? I was talking to one of my friends. He's been in the AI sector since, the early 90s. Yeah. And, he was out in San Francisco, and talk about Rochester right now. He's back in Rochester, and he's crushing it here.
Nice.
And so he's looking at it, and he goes, yeah, dude, I was looking at a report yesterday, and at this point, less than 1% of people are touching AI every hour. I'm on AI 5 to 7 times per hour, right?
Oh yeah.
He goes, I don't think of myself as like a power user, but that puts me in the top 0.001% of users, right? And so the utilization versus the value is still early, but we also haven't reduced some of the costs, right? Like the token costs and everything else are still high. And that adoption curve and the utilization curve of all that hopefully should come way back down, as some of the infrastructure things solidify and our ecosystem keeps up with them.
Yeah, that's remarkable. And just anecdotally with myself, I mean, it is just as much.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm behind, and my circle of friends, same, right? Everyone I talk to, I've got 2 jobs. I'm trying to keep up with AI, learn as much as I can, and maintain my other job, my actual job. And then there's people. The other day, a friend was like, "Hey, I just started using ChatGPT. what should I be asking you? I was like, wow, you know, like,
And that's the thing. We don't know yet. We're not yet programmed in terms of what skills are we giving up, right? It was like I was
yeah,
sitting there yesterday in an
yeah,
Excel document, moving things around. I go, you know what? Why am I doing this? I'm sure Claude would do it better, and
I
I
can do it.
just to test it. And I was like, oh God, I just wasted 2 hours of my life, and Claude fixed it in five minutes. Of what it.
Yeah.
But in my head, it's a task that I'm already good at, so why would I give it up? And so, I think that's a big piece is like, how do we start to say,
Mhm.
oh, okay, so that's what this could be used for. That's what this could be used for. And so I think we're just in the understanding phase, and I think you're going to see the value create get a lot higher, but it's going to take a little while for people to adapt to it.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, basic example. I was just talking to a bunch of guys and they were like, "You're still typing everything?"
Yep.
Like, yeah,
Yeah.
I type very fast. It's something I'm proud of. I type like 80 words a minute. I'm telling my kids, I'm like, you gotta learn how to use a
Yep.
keyboard. And they're like, Dad, what are you talking about? Everything is verbal,
Oh, yeah,
right? Whisper
unbelievable.
flow and
Yep.
it's
Well, you said I still remember we had like a Mario game to teach us how to type fast
yeah,
as a kid, and I was like, "Hey, did you see that? Home row, I got 200 words per minute." Like I was
exactly.
so like
I don't even know if that will be a thing now.
that's exactly right. Now my
Yeah.
kid came home very proud of himself for learning how to sign his name in cursive. He's, "Yeah, they don't really teach us, but look, I can sign it." I was like, "I don't know if you ever need to sign anything again, buddy, but that's awesome." That's right.
Yeah, you gotta have your autograph
Yeah.
signature.
Yeah, it's a big evolution curve right now.
Okay. All right. So a last stretch before rapid fire questions and we wrap up. So I want to I think the audience that we have is mostly founders, operators, B2B executives, and I want to give them the most direct advice you can offer,
Mhm.
um, being in the investor seat, because I think there's a lot of noise around there. What is the honest version, right? So like, how do they get, I know this is probably a nuanced question, but if you were them, if you were a founder trying to raise money,
Mhm.
how do they build authority? How do they get in front of you and to be taken seriously?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think there's 2 legitimate ways to do it, right? And, I think your question earlier in terms of AI
Yeah.
emails was apropos because it used to be that I wanted to read every single email because I, wanted to make sure that people who were the underdogs who didn't get seen had a chance to be seen, and that's gonna get harder and harder to do. So
Right.
2 things, right? The value of networks is only gonna go up higher and higher. Trust is gonna be everything in my opinion, as people have less things that they need to do on a daily basis because AI is helping offload that. Our interactions, our immediate connections are gonna matter that much more. So figure out how do you get warm introductions and referrals is gonna be
Mhm.
really important. And then 2, adding value before you need things is gonna be fundamental, right? I will
Yeah.
forever be appreciative to, Brad Feld and the team over at Techstars for, their mantra, pay it forward because, give first, because at the end of the day, if you aren't helping build your ecosystem, if you're not helping, seed and create value, it's a lot harder for you to get favors back. And so I always say to founders, when you first get going, go in as you're learning, figure out where you can add value for your customers, add value for your investors, add value for the ecosystem, add value for, lawyers and
Mm.
for, the accountants and for everyone else who's building. Because if you do that, people will want to help you and they're going to remember you years down the road. And you might not collect on 100% of those favors ever. And hopefully you don't. But if you put stuff out into the world and you follow up and you create rigidity in your capacity to follow up, you're going to get some of the best introductions. And I think that's a part of that legacy that stands forever. And so I would say if you want to get in to see me, come in, through someone I know and I trust,
Yeah.
because that's, it's not an automatic. I'm still going to do diligence, but I don't want to, Justin says, hey, this guy's a good guy. I'm probably going to listen. Right. And so,
Sure. Yep.
um, I would try to always figure out how you can get in through warm referrals, but that requires that you do the hard work of building and adding value first.
Yeah. I really like that. Give first. That's great. What is the biggest mistake you see founders try to make?
Ooh, I mean, there's tons of things that people mess up on. I think the biggest thing is not being aware of what you don't know, thinking
Mm.
that you can do everything on your own. And I think as we get to headless organizations, right, or low organizations, people are going to continue to overestimate how good of an output they are creating without having real validation for what that looks like in market. The best founders are the ones that know where their blind spots are. They're not trying to solve those themselves, but they're figuring out what else can we delegate? Who else do I need? Where else can I add value? And I mean, it sounds weird, but I love one of the faster growing founders that I know right now. He always said, hey, one of my favorite things that I love about, being in the business world versus being back in college is if I ask other people for help, it was considered cheating. And now it's called getting ahead, right? It's delegation. And the really good founders look at people as builders, right? It's a co-invention tool. It's not a single thing. And so too many founders try to take on too much by themselves without kind of figuring out how they allocate resources effectively to grow.
That's a great piece of advice. That's really good. Because I think it's easy for founders to try to, because they know a lot. So they're like, I'll just do it. I'll do it. And I'll be the hero.
Right.
And everyone's got limited time. So I think
like that's the problem with, quote unquote, the Harvard kid, right? Is like, they're so used to being right on so many things, right? And you used to being able to be good at everything that it's hard to say, oh, well, I don't have to be good at this one. I can have someone else be good. And that's going to help me move quicker. So it's a learned behavior for sure.
All right. Rapid fire. You can pass, but these are quick questions. I ask everybody this, okay, at the end.
Yep.
Just have a little fun. Twitter 2009 or LinkedIn 2026?
I mean, God, LinkedIn today is getting pretty atrocious. Twitter is always terrible, in my opinion. So I got off of Twitter very early, so I'm going to have to go with LinkedIn 2026.
All right. Okay. Big fish in a small pond or small pond, big fish? This is
time and a place for both of them.
Okay. All right. That's fair.
I don't think either of them are adaptive by themselves.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
That's fair. Most overrated things founders do when pitching investors. Most overrated.
Overrated. Probably the use of extreme language, right? Trying to catch all the cool hype words.
Sounding very smart.
Yeah. Not everything can be contrarian, right? Like every input is not contrarian. I think the other piece is at the end of the day, right? We want to get to know you. So jumping directly into your pitch versus taking the time to explain the why and the how is a hugely overrated activity.
Okay. That's great. We got the overrated and underrated there.
Yep.
One tool or habit that you couldn't operate without right now in today's world?
Oh, I think two things. Claude is all day, every day. It's driving so much for us and it's adding a lot of value. And then fitness. I think most founders and most investors, I certainly did forget about the value of endorphins and what kind of keeping yourself centered does for you. So that's the habit.
I couldn't agree more with that second piece. Well, both pieces actually.
I put that in just for your benefit.
Yeah. No, I think you got to feed the machine first, your body. All right, best book you've gifted the most this year, or ever.
Groupthink by Irvis Channing. Okay. Book that I was introduced to during college. It focuses in on how most teams are built around people who look and act like you, and as a result, you underperform too many guesses versus constructive criticism and feedback, and it focuses very heavily on how do you build an effective team, which I love.
That's awesome. Yeah, I get that.
Yep.
Okay, last question. And I ask everybody this: you spent your career betting on people before anyone else does, from nonprofits at TUGG to the founders at Impellent, and you've seen firsthand what it costs people when nobody knows who they are and what it does for them when they build something real. So with all of that said, what does reputation mean to you today?
It's everything, right? We live in a business where everything is measured in days, months and quick years. But the truth is your trajectory is a lot longer than that. The relationships and partnerships that you built 10, 20, 30 years ago and the reputation you set 10, 20, 30 years ago are going to come back and be valuable for you for a long time.
Yeah.
I would say invest with the integrity and the focus of tomorrow and not just today. So continue to build around honesty, focus, and repeatability, because that's what's going to allow you to build for a long time, not just a quick flip.
We'll just end it there. That was fantastic.
Awesome.
David, thanks, man. It's been great talking to you.
Always. Pleasure, my friend. Thank you.